Hi, everyone. I'm Ken, and welcome to Parable Minutes. We are starting a new set of conversations called The Way That We Live. We couldn't go on with this conversation about the way that all the different industries are being recreated without talking about how our homes, apartments, and neighborhoods are being redesigned and rethought in this day and age that we live in. My first guest is Stuart Vokes. I'm just in love with his work. If you're looking to redesign or think about your home, or even just your room, your workplace, or your retail experience, or your restaurant, if you're thinking about making it feel connected to this idea of home, this is a great conversation for you to listen in. The idea of a home has been with man for ever since we walked this earth. The idea of having a shelter, a sanctuary, a place to raise a family, a place to thrive. This is an archetypal place that has been with us for a long, long time. So what do we keep that has been with us all this time? What's important? What makes us human? What are the things that we can improve on? What are the things that we can change? This is going to be the things that we're going to be talking about in these next few conversations. So if that's you and you're interested in this subject, sit back, relax, and enjoy the next conversation.
I do find myself really inspired by meeting people and learning more about their stories. And it's always been where we find the evocative brief for a project is in the storytelling. What's more beautiful is when someone just shares a story with us about their favorite restaurant or a meal that they really love to cook, or the way in which their grandparent or parent taught them how to make something in the kitchen for themselves, you know? Yeah. And there's always a seed of an idea in there for a building or a room. Those stories kind of play out in our lives over and over, I think. You know, we repeat them and we often subconsciously, but I think often consciously, we retell those stories in our own actions. So they're really important. Often those stories are from early childhood as well.
Yes, that's a massive thing I feel when I look at your work. There is this very distinct sense of posterity, this distinct sense of memory in everything you do. As you move throughout a space, like there is this feeling of memory, and I can't explain that. How much of that do you feel is also, you know, like your memories that you have from growing up in your home that you're bringing into the mix as well?
Well, I think the product of architecture and architectural thinking is always shared discussions and negotiations and a journey that we go on together. And it's beautiful when suddenly we realize that we have shared values with our clients. And we have shared stories and collective stories. So we might grow up in different places and we might grow up in vastly different circumstances. But what binds us is that we're all human. We collectively become the design team. And that's really important, that we invite clients into that process as part of our design team. We're not just service providers, even though at a kind of very boring kind of business contractual level, that's our job. And that's why sometimes it's very challenging for us to suggest a different way of being, you know, because sometimes it's almost offensive that someone should try and tell you how it is that you like to live your life. But we're never really doing that. And there are many ways in which all kinds of rooms can satisfy events, you know, and can satisfy the needs of domestic or business occupancy. There are those moments where it feels like we're the adversary of our client, pushing a kind of ideas that are new to our clients into the story. But it's beautiful when we have a shared and collective memory, you know, shared experience, and together we kind of own the kind of the agenda, really. Like the idea for a project comes out of this sort of shared set of values.
I love it. When you think about home, what are some of the most vivid memories that you have growing up?
That's a good question. Often I've been envious of people who have great nostalgia for the house that they grew up in, because I don't. But I have this great nostalgia for the garden of my childhood, and it's still there in remnants, in part, you know. And when we had our first child, the thing that really moved me was taking him down into the garden that I played in as a child. In a way, it's kind of more beautiful because it was a garden that my mother and father constructed. You know, they didn't live in this era now of kind of affluence where you finish your building and then you get the landscapers in and you get a landscape designer to design the garden. My father built the retaining walls and concrete paths, and they went to the nurseries and selected plants, and they grew the plants, and together we mowed the lawn and did the edges, and so in a way, going down into the garden with my son, I found to be kind of really quite moving. And it's the thing that I seek out, actually.
When you start to fashion and you start to create home, would you say your approach is more practical, or is it more emotional, or how are these two interlinked together?
Maybe to sort of reference one of the modern architects of the 20th century, Corbusier, the idea of the free plan or the free facade really begins with quite a rigid, determined structure. And then once that's in place, one then has an ability to be agile and to be liberated from that structure. And I kind of feel like the pragmatic in the work, it just takes care of itself. We know there's going to be appliances in a kitchen, and we know there's going to be PowerPoints, and to dwell in sharing of emotions and feelings is something that's really accessible for everyone, and for us a lot more kind of evocative. I think there are fundamental shared responses that we all have as humans to really simple things about being and existing. The kind of story that client might offer about a lazy afternoon with their family after kids' sport on a Saturday says that there are particular things about that room that we already know from patterns of occupation and room typologies that we can study through the ages that will fit beautifully with that event that's being described.
Yes.
And so in a way, it takes the mystery out of design as well, because much of what we're doing is taking an event which is so evocatively and beautifully described through feelings and emotions. We're pairing that with known room typologies. And in a way, our scholarship is so deeply involved in learning and searching and reading about and experiencing modes of occupancy that have always existed, ideas in architecture and room typology, that has been there for, across the world.
It's archetypal.
These archetypal spaces. And in a way, it sort of suggests that maybe our role as placemakers is to be custodians of ideas that already existed. We're not, Aaron and I never see ourselves or our practice as being great innovators. Maybe we engage in a subtle form of innovation in the way in which things are composed in any particular project. But really, it's our task to know about rooms and ideas that have already existed, because what we then can do is it's matchmaking.
After all the years of work that you've been doing, just seeing kind of like what works and what people resonate with, I want to know personally in Stuart's heart, what do you think a great home should be?
I think in a way, if a home has any sort of relationship to a city, I don't think a home should have any sort of demand to be a public place. So I think if anything, a home should just be simply another room in the city. I guess I think about, well, what kind of room should it be? Should it be a grand reading room in a public library? Should it be like the room that you kind of write emails in at work? And I think I always land on the idea, and this really sort of starts to reveal something about myself anyway. I think a room should just simply be at least the one place where you can go in the city where you can discover yourself and be yourself and find some kind of solitude, reflect on your own humanity and your own existence, I think. Because so much of what's happening in the city and all of the other rooms in the city is sort of taking us outside of ourselves in a way. We spend so much time not with our own thoughts and being quite disconnected from the ground, metaphorically. We're so ungrounded. And I think I personally need my home to be a place where I can return every day and reconnect, I guess.
There is that demand for it to be a public space, in a sense that, what are people going to think about my home? Where does this finishing stack me in the social ranking? And I feel that, like you said, that is totally counterintuitive to creating a space where you can discover yourself, because you've been creating a space for so many other communities or so many other people in mind. And I don't think it's a question of generosity, but it's a question of authenticity that you're building your home in.